Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here moderating today's panel. Renewables like wind and solar have become inexpensive sources of electricity and are being built at a rapid pace. But these sources aren't always available when and where we need them. As people on Twitter love to remind me, the sun does in fact go down at night. This is where today's panelists come in. They're all working in one way or another to build our new energy system. I'm so excited to learn from them, so let's introduce them and get into this conversation. First up, I'm joined by Tulika Raj, co-founder and CEO of SungreenH2, which develops advanced materials for green hydrogen production. And I'd also like to introduce Michael Peither, co-founder and chief technical officer of VoltStorage, which is working on large-scale battery storage systems. Welcome, both of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to jump in by having you kind of introduce your work in a little bit more detail. And if you could tell us, what your company is working on and how you fit into this puzzle of this new energy storage system. Let's start with Tulika.
Thanks so much, Casey. Great to be here. So SungreenH2 is really bringing a nanotech level advanced green hydrogen production so that what we do is supercharge all electrolyzers, so orders more magnitude of green hydrogen can cleanly be made from water. And really, we have a vision for zero carbon, low cost green hydrogen available at scale. The whole idea is to unlock a sustainable, scalable way of producing energy for widespread decarbonization in industry, mobility, power to X, energy storage.
Great. Awesome. Michael, if you want to hop in.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. So VoltStorage is developing batteries for long-duration energy storage. So what does long-duration energy storage means? That means basically charge and discharge times of more than 10 hours. So in case you don't have wind and solar over a period of a day, 2, or even more days, you can use the stored energy in our batteries. And our battery technology is based on commodity materials. And one of our developments is the so-called iron salt battery. And as the name suggests, it only runs with iron, some salts, and water in a redox flow setting, meaning that it is one of the lowest cost, but also one of the easiest to obtain material batteries in the world.
Really exciting and interesting. I think the energy storage space is just growing so quickly. And I mean, that's evidenced in both of your industries, hydrogen and batteries. Michael, I want you to talk a little bit more about kind of different approaches to batteries. When I talk to people in this space, a lot of people are just kind of daunted by kind of the growth curves that are needed for energy storage. Can you talk a little bit about sort of different approaches and if you think there's going to be one clear winner in the battery space, or if you think there's room for all of these products to kind of coexist?
So there's no one size fits all in the battery space. As I already mentioned, is that we're working on long-duration energy storage. But there's a variety of different battery technologies and storage technologies for different applications. You have lithium-ion batteries that are very good in applications where you have to have mobility. Let's say electric cars, smartphones, laptops, etc., because they are light, because they can also be charged very quickly. And then on the extreme far end of that, you have something like power to gas to power, something that Tulika is working on as well, where you store basically large amounts of power, not focusing on quick charging, but on very long times where you don't have electricity available from sun and wind, etc. We are fitting the more longer end of this application. Our batteries are designed for durations, so meaning charge and discharge times of 12, 24, 48 hours, or even above that, maximum of 100 hours, so a week. And what we want to do with those batteries is basically bridge a couple of days where you don't have wind, especially, or longer periods where you don't have sun. But there are also other battery technologies that are not lithium-ion batteries, or what we're working on, or gas power to gas applications. They are focusing on very short durations, like milliseconds or seconds of interruptions, or anything between that. But I always say is like we need a lot of batteries, like trillions of battery cells. The amount is so massive that people don't grasp it, that it is not a problem of producing them, but it's also a problem of resources and a problem of raw materials. And this is what we want to solve with our battery. This is our different approach, not using resources being used for electric car batteries or smartphone batteries, but going a different way. Our batteries are useless for mobile applications. Our batteries are good for stationary applications where you don't have to move them. And that is basically what we do different to other battery manufacturers.
Great. Thanks so much for kind of laying that out for us. And I want to come back to materials in a bit, but first I want to hear from Tulika on this sort of applications question. I know hydrogen is kind of getting talked about for all these different industries, for storage, for, taking along on transportation applications. So I'm curious from your perspective if there are kind of certain areas that you're really interested to bring green hydrogen to, and if you can kind of talk us through a few of those.
Yeah, what SungreenH2 does is we manufacture core components for electrolyzers, all types of electrolyzers. So any modern electrolyzer is made of a sandwich of cells formed into stacks, and then these form the systems. And there's a few different types of technologies available out there, very mature technologies like alkaline electrolysis, newer technology like proton exchange membrane electrolyzers, and then very innovative ones coming out like solid oxide, membrane-free, you name it, anion exchange membrane. What SungreenH2 does is we take very low-cost earth-abundant materials, nanostructure them to drop into existing electrolyzers so that they can produce double the amount of hydrogen from the same kit for the same capex cost and reduce the amount of energy consumed by 10%. And where I'm driving towards all of this is sustainably and scalably without using any precious metals. And why? Is because hydrogen is actually already available quite massively. It's a 90 million ton industry. It's a $150 billion market. But almost all of our hydrogen today is being made from fossil fuels. So where we are very focused is on making affordable green hydrogen from water electrolysis to replace all that gray hydrogen, which is currently being used in industry. Because let's face it, we live in a carbon-constrained world. One of the main reasons that sun and wind, solar and wind energy has really taken off in recent times is in order for its decarbonization potential in the electricity sector. So we are here to answer the question, when you cannot renewably electrify something, how can you decarbonize it? And so every single place where in industry you're using hydrogen as a feedstock, as a source of high temperature heat in iron and steel making, in chemical manufacturing, in our ammonia making for our fertilizer use, we want to replace all that gray hydrogen with green. And let's face it, if it's not cheap, you're not going to replace it. And so we can make that green hydrogen affordable regardless of the type of electrolyzer technology that it is. And what we believe that does is it unlocks multiple applications where you can drop in large-scale uses of green hydrogen to replace existing gray hydrogen, but also in emerging use cases in the mobility sector like deriving fuels for and synthetic fuels from hydrogen for shipping, aviation, long-distance trucking, but also, as Michael mentioned earlier, very long duration, seasonal storage of renewable energy. Because let's think about the fact that when there's too much wind or there's too much solar and the grid can't take it, you're curtailing all that renewable power. Electrolysis-based green hydrogen offers you a way to store it for months, as well as if you've got enough surplus that you can store and use later to replace, let's say, diesel gensets in some kind of application, power to extra power, then that's great as well. So again, wherever you cannot take renewable electricity directly, I believe hydrogen offers a way to drop in another means of decarbonizing very hard-to-abate sectors. So those are the applications.
Great. Thank you so much. These are both just such kind of exciting visions. And I want to hear more about sort of the on-the-ground reality for you both, like as startup founders. So I wonder if you could both kind of give me a sense of where you are in kind of your life as a startup company, your funding journey to this point, and kind of what you're looking at now. Like what kind of state are you in right now? So Michael, if you want to start with that.
What kind of stage in life are we in with our startup? I'd say still teenage years. Okay. So we tried a few things. We have developed different technologies, brought a product already to market, made some revenues, but we are focusing on the larger market, the larger picture now. So I'd say we're still in the teen years, still getting started. And yeah, I mean, also time-wise, we started the company in 2015, 2016. So it's been 5-6 years now. And we've gone through a lot, from early not knowing what to do to our first investor and accelerator program in SOSV, to really first VC money, to scaling the team from the 3 of founders that we were to 60 people that we are now. And now the next step, going to 100 and scaling up the technology, building up production, etc. These things, I think that is the transition phase that everybody would call in his life as teenage years. So I'm sticking with that.
I love the teenage years thing. I want to follow up on that before we go to Tulika. I understand that you did kind of go through a pivot, and that's sort of something that a lot of startups do, kind of refocus on, something maybe related or just kind of realize, oh, this is maybe a better path for us. Can you talk about kind of making that decision and how that kind of played out?
I wouldn't call it a full pivot.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
it's
not
market,
that we sold bread and now we're doing batteries. It's something related. We did sell batteries for residential houses with the basically same basis technology, a few different materials, but we focused on the residential market. Why? Because it was the easiest way to enter a market that's already quite mature. It's, I think, the biggest market for stationary storage applications in terms of numbers. A few 100,000 batteries are getting sold every year for residential houses. So that was ideal. The sales times or the sales cycles basically were very short. The development cycles and production cycles there were very short as well. So that was the easy step in as a market. We decided to focus on this larger market, commercial, industrial, but also grid scale applications of batteries. So batteries that are massive for wind parks, solar farms, etc., with several megawatt or gigawatt hours. Why do we do that? Because personally, I and also our business development team think that this stationary storage application for residential is a trend thing right now, but it won't help for the greater good of electricity grids, and it won't help for the greater good of having solar and wind into the grid. Because let's face it, a lot of people live in the city in an apartment, don't have rooftop solar, don't have the space to put up batteries, and also don't have the money to do that if they are living in a rented apartment. And if you ask every expert on grids and the large electricity system, they would answer you that residential batteries are a nice thing to have. You can sell them. You can start in that market very well. There is a market for that. But for the greater good, it doesn't really work. Also, our technology is better for larger batteries. It's cheaper for larger batteries. That's not only the case with lithium-ion batteries, but with our battery especially as well. Scaling it up is, it helps with the economies per unit, per kilowatt hour. And thus it makes the whole electricity from renewables, storing it in a battery and getting it into the grid 24/7 as a baseload power. This is what we want to do in the future. Not just peak shaving, etc., but having a baseload power over an entire year of solar and wind. And that can only be achieved with large batteries in the grid.
Great. Thanks for that. Tulika, tell me about where you are in the lifetime of your startup.
Yeah, so we're a pandemic baby that was started off in 2020, less than 2 years old, came out of SOSV's hacks as well. And now we've gone through that cycle into the stage where we've had our first VC investments in, raised a seed end of last year, now looking to raise a Series A. We've started making first revenues and are bringing our first products to market. So it's an exciting time where we are trying to launch the product while we're also keeping an eye, like Michael said, on expanding applications and larger use cases for our technology. So let's say we start out with electrolyzer cell, core components for electrolyzer cell stacks and systems. We start with the core components, and now we have started to build our own very first full end-use applications, starting to build those exciting partnerships in the business so that we can start bringing more full-scale solutions to the end customer, always keeping an eye on affordable green hydrogen production at the end of the day. So it's an exciting time for us as we're pre-teen years, but very much taken our first steps into the business and finding it very exciting.
Great. I know. I feel like I'm thinking that you're both in such exciting times, but just I feel like every time is exciting for a startup. So I think it's kind of maybe a moot point. I'm curious from both of you. You're in pretty different places as far as your funding, but what advice would you have for either your past selves or maybe somebody else coming up as a climate tech founder, kind of in this funding realm? What do you wish that you had known as you kind of came into this space? Tulika, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I have an investment background myself, having spent some time in renewable funds before starting up SungreenH2. And I think something that holds true regardless of what business you're in is investment discipline. A business is essentially, I believe, supposed to self-generate revenues to survive. So to the extent that you want to fundraise, I think you've got to be very disciplined about where are you going with this cash? Why are you raising these funds? What milestones in your development journey are you going to de-risk? And just work backwards from that in a very systematic manner. And so one thing you always have to kiss many frogs, I think, to get your, institutional investments in. But I would say the more disciplined a process you can make it and really stick to that, I think it frees you up with more time to build the business as opposed to fundraising. So this would be my one big takeaway.
Mm-hmm. Michael, what about you?
Tulika is right about the revenues, but sometimes you have a business case or a technology that cannot be just developed from bootstrapping, etc., and needs large amounts of money, which I think both of our businesses fall into that category. So let's not kid ourselves. But I think one of the main things during all the fundraising processes, etc., is discipline and persistency. So we have talked to hundreds of investors, to be honest, approached hundreds of investors. And in the end, we now have a handful in our cap table. And there might be times that when something doesn't work out, when actually nothing works out, when everybody kind of cancels your calls, don't attend meetings, and it won't work, just stick to it and believe in that you will succeed. And you have to have something to show for a good product, something that really changes the world in terms of like climate tech, solves a lot of problems, etc. So let's focus on that. But also, you have to believe in yourself and that it work out in the end. And if it doesn't work out, it's not the end yet.
I think I'll add to that if you're a startup founder working in the climate tech space, many of our solutions are hard tech based and they are not overnight solutions. Your middle name has to be resilience. So you've got to be excited about what you're building and the difference that your technology can make to the world or in general for specifically the climate tech problem. And every day when the chips are down, when the chips are up, you have to get up and bound out and be excited about what you're building, because some days, as Michael said, you're going to get lots of no's for every yes that you get. And you've really got to be very resilient about focusing on still trying to get that goal met that you started out the original journey on, the reason for the original journey. So that's what I would say, be resilient.
Yes, totally agree. And we talked about our pivot before, that is one thing. We started out with a different idea or like with a different market that we wanted to attract in the long term. But things change over the times. It's been 5 years and the market changed, the perception on renewables, also the global impact and the global politics, economy, etc., changed around that. And that's why I think you have to be flexible as well. And 90% of the days are not good because something doesn't work. Especially in electrochemistry, this is so true. 99% of what you do is destroying something and hoping that you find one day the perfect solution. But you have to stick with it. Resilience is a good word.
This is straight up inspirational. Loving this positivity. So I have been really excited recently. I feel like I'm seeing more startups starting outside of like California or the West Coast US. And you're both obviously not based in Silicon Valley. Can you talk about kind of where you are in the world and how that's kind of impacted your growth as a business? Whether that's finding people to fund you, finding people to work with you. Kind of talk about how location has kind of played into your journey so far.
All right, so we are based in Munich, Germany, and Germany is kind of or was the hub for solar power and renewables, and we're very, thoughtful of the resources, especially now since the Ukraine-Russia thing, which had a huge impact on people's perception on renewables and storage, and why we need long-duration energy storage. But that's a story for another talk. I think you can fill hours with that. It did help us that people here and businesses here and also grid operators and the whole electricity grid is kind of well known to renewables and adapting renewables quite quickly. So we have 50 to 60%, whatever you count as definition, in renewable energies in the grid. And that is quite a bit, more than I think a lot of other industrialized nations. So that helped us a lot on the customer, on the application side, and is still helping us. So we have huge interest from the DACH regions of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland because of this phenomenon of high integration of renewables. On the other side, funding-wise, it is, I think, and starting a company, I think Germany is the worst country in the world to do that. No joke. Bureaucracy is I don't have a word to describe it, but it's not good. And funding-wise, as investors being based in Central Europe or especially Germany are very anxious about hard, deep tech developments where you need a lot of money, which is high risk. They rather invest their money in the delivery heroes, Zalandos, whatever, gorillas in this world. So very easy to obtain solutions, software solutions, etc. And deep tech is problematic here, but we do have a couple of companies here in Munich. We have a good ecosystem of companies, starting from electric car manufacturer down the road. We have the industry here. We have companies like Lilium that are building flying cars basically, and now Nasdaq listed, etc. So I think here in this region, in this city itself, it helped us that we've been here with the fundraising, but I think it would be much better in California, to be honest.
Thanks for that real answer. I appreciate that. Tulika, what about you? You're based in Singapore, right?
That's right. So SungreenH2 is based in Singapore, and we have operations now in Australia as well. And even starting out from the bat, I would say that the pandemic in that sense was an interesting time to launch a business because everything was happening on Zoom. So in our first year of running, we literally, met people from all over the world, including investors, customers, early partners, research institutions from California. We're now working with labs in California, by the way, Germany, European Union, Canada, and it was all on Zoom. So in that sense, there were no borders for us, and really, I think, have been a beneficiary of that. And that brings you to the point that if you're building a clean tech business that is really addressing markets that are very much advancing in, let's say, the European Union region and the Americas region, then you've got to think about a way to get over there. So a lot of the work that we've done initially we were lucky in the pandemic not to be held back by borders. We really focused on finding those early partners in these markets to start trying to build both a customer base as well as an investor base in these markets. But I won't kid you, it is not easy. And especially now that borders have opened up, there are no pandemic restrictions. We're back to doing this, hard graft. And I spent this summer traveling between New York, California, Canada, Brussels, and Germany. And I'm telling you, it was a lot less effective than, we've been doing it on Zoom so far. So, in that sense, it really is hard graft to get over there and address a market that is not maybe in your immediate vicinity. However, I will say this. We're based in Singapore, and Singapore is an amazing ecosystem for test bedding solutions. So it's been really beneficial for us as a startup in our early stages to be here because we've had tons of opportunities to actually, demonstrate the technology, which is very important in the early stages of the company. So your immediate ecosystem is as important, I would say, as, the ultimate markets that you're trying to address. And you've got to think about how you're going to grow into those, is what I would say.
Yeah. Really great, really interesting perspectives. And I think, yeah, this kind of changing world where some things can be done remotely, but sometimes you just got to get in front of people. We have a couple of minutes left, and I want to kind of end with your beginnings. I wonder if you could tell us, just kind of briefly, what made you take this leap, become a climate tech founder? What was it for you? So Tulika, do you want to start us off with that last question?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I started out my career on offshore oil and gas rigs in Kazakhstan and Norway, working in the oil field services business. And a couple of years as a young engineer doing this, I was so naturally drawn to my first job at BP's alternative energy business in London, where we were building out the first wind farms in India and China, generating the carbon credits from that, and then monetizing them back into the EU ETS. And so I would say that was really the first spark, watching Clean Tech 1.0 unfold. I then subsequently went to work for a couple of renewable funds where we, developed, scaled, and exited solar and wind businesses globally in Europe as well as in South Africa. It really germinated the idea that clean energy could be a source of, sustainable energy transition. And now, all these years later, when I look back, I think the germ or what germinated the idea for SungreenH2 is that wind and solar can, solve 25% of our CO2 emissions problem. You need so many other technologies to solve the remaining 75%. What are those? They're hydrogen, they're batteries, and that's what excites me about getting up and building SungreenH2 every day.
Great. Michael?
Yeah, so I'm also electrical engineer by training. I studied that, but we started the company out of university right away. So we didn't have any prior big job experience. I mean, we all did have student jobs, but that basically concludes our job experience and our professional experience. I think all us three founders, so Jacob and Felix and I, we really believe in that we can do something good for the society, for the world, hopefully in the end, and that we want to build a great company with great employees, but also a great product, great technology to solve the most pressing issue of our time, I think, and that is the transition to renewables. And I think that keeps us going every single day and gives us basically the energy to do that, even if there are ups and downs. As Tulika said, pandemic was a harsh reality for us. As well, changed a lot, and now we're back into another mode again. But it's been tough, as I said, approaching hundreds of investors, trying to convince people, etc. But it gives back so much when you achieve something and something works in the end. That is the greatest feeling of all, to have something that you imagined a couple of years ago and it works out in the end. And that's, I think, what we're all fighting for here.
This is just, I think, such a wonderful place to end it. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and your energy. This was just such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. It was a really fantastic
Thank you very much as well.
Great. And thanks so much to everybody listening in, to our audience. And I'm going to hand it back over to SOSV.